going on, guys, and welcome to the Touchdowns to Home Runs post-game show. I hope your Saturday evening is going very well. We have a final score from Georgia. Number 3 Georgia beats number 14 Tennessee Volunteers by a score of 44-21. And this was a very interesting game, or so it looked like it in the first half. It was definitely a tale of two halves. We're going to break down sort of the game by each team. Sort of how it went, why Tennessee ended up losing, why Georgia won, and then we're going to break down sort of each team going into next week. Let's start with Tennessee. Tennessee went into the half actually winning by a score of 21-17. They had a really early break early on in the first quarter. A really bad snap over the head of Stetson Bennett led to a touchdown on defense before Tennessee really had to even do any work. A lot of plays in general went Tennessee's way in the first half. We look towards the end of the first half, the fourth down stop that they got on Georgia, and if we put those two together, that's a 10 to 14 point swing right there, but it was going really good for Tennessee going into the second half. In the Tennessee second half, everything really fell apart. We're talking about two turnovers early, 3 turnovers overall in the second half. They got lucky early. Georgia had really good field position on the interception and early fumble, but they only got something like -1 yards and 2 3-and-out. So Tennessee's defense did a good job there, but that led to 6 points and then another touchdown on the third turnover at the half. So 13 points off turnovers in the second half is obviously a big reason that they ended up losing. But I felt that Georgia's defense did a great job and Tennessee's offense was the complete opposite. Some of the big stats I see right here, 3 for 16 on third down. When you're putting up only 21 points, obviously 3 third down conversions, or 4 third down conversions with the one at the end, 4 for 17. Obviously they have to be better than that. They only had 214 yards of total offense. They had -1 rushing yards overall as well in 27 rushing attempts. 215 passing yards, but -1 rushing attempts, and obviously that's a huge difference. Guarantano did not have a great day, 10 carries, -40 yards. Eric Gray was okay, only 8 carries for 25 yards. Chandler, again, 8 carries, 11 yards, and if you watch my preview show, I said that those guys were going to have to be the difference makers, and they weren't today. Guarantano overall, 23 for 36. He was all right, except for the interception and 2 fumbles, 215 yards. Not the worst in the world, but again, the turnovers in the second half ended up costing Tennessee. Obviously, at the beginning of the game, one of the areas that hurt Tennessee was the targeting ejection for Deandre Johnson. That, quite frankly, shouldn't have happened. It was a very stupid play. He shouldn't have lowered his head. It was a very late hit as well. He should have got ejected, but it just was so unnecessary. And if you want to look at that on possibly why the game swung, then that's a reason. But I think there were just a ton of issues that Tennessee had on both sides of the ball. I think, again, the third down efficiency, the turnovers, even some of the penalties. They had some really bad penalties at some points in the game, but I think overall this was just Georgia's game to win. Let's flip over to Georgia. Georgia had probably the worst start that they could have had when we're talking about the 7 right away. They received the ball, allowed these 7 right away. There were a lot of moments in the first half that could have gone towards the Bulldogs. If they score in that last minute of the first half, this was an entirely different game. But they came out firing on defense, even with the struggles, and the defense hung in there enough for Stetson Bennett in the offense to figure it out. Stetson Bennett last week was his first start. We didn't really know what he was going to do with the offense this week in terms of how consistent he was going to be, but he ended up passing 16 for 27, 238 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He was all right. I still think in the first half there's some balls that Stetson Bennett would like back. And we go back to sort of that same thing last week. I think the more, though, that he plays at the college level, the more he gets those especially easier throws down. I think that this offense will become even better. Zamir White didn't have the best day, 22 carries for 50 yards. But overall, Georgia actually ran the ball pretty well. They had 5 guys who ran it over 20 yards. They had 4 guys who ran it over 40 yards. So overall, they really outran Tennessee. 238 total passing yards, 193 total rushing yards. They didn't have too many penalties at all. Still the 2 fumble losses, but overall they were able to put up 44 points and overall perform pretty well. If we're looking ahead to the future games for Tennessee, next week they have Kentucky. Kentucky last week had an OT loss to Ole Miss, and the week before they lost to Auburn, who was ranked number 8 at the time. I should have a video coming out on the channel around Tuesday. That's a preview for this game and Georgia's next game as well. Next week, Georgia has probably the biggest game of their season against number 2 Alabama. Alabama's beaten A&M and Missouri as well. Missouri played very well today. In case you watched that game, didn't watch that game, but Missouri was playing really well. Alabama is obviously playing really well, so that should be a very exciting game next week. I think it'll be very exciting to see how Stetson Bennett can continue to develop and lead this offense, but only time will tell, so we'll have to see that next week. If you guys made it to this point in the video, listened to the podcast, liked what you guys heard, make sure to leave a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, turn on post notifications so that you guys can stay updated on the previews for these games and also the post games. As always, guys, thank you so much for listening in, and we'll see you guys next time.